Te reo Māori is the original language of this whenua.
Kuira te reo mātāmua o tēnei whenua.
So how does the original language reach the point of near extinction?
The native schools are straight out of the colonial playbook. It was an active removal enacted in physically violent ways.
When you are caned and whipped for speaking Māori, it's virtually impossible to really share the feelings that you get.
From the generations of children that were beaten for speaking it.
It was state-sponsored terrorism.
To a group of young activists who stood up to reclaim it.
We got to the point where, no more politeness. We just need to shove it in their faces and let them know that we're not happy with the way in which they treat us.
This is the unfiltered story of Te reo Māori.
Ka te reo Māori, te reo tuatahi o tō tātou whenua. I muri, i te hunukutanga mai o ngā iwi o te moana nui ākiua ki Aotearoa nei.
I te wai hara mai ai ngā tupuna i Hawaii ki rāno. Tai mai ki konei, ka kite atu i etahi mea kāri reira i tō rātou whenua i tā wāhira.
He rereke tōna hanga, ngā rākau, ngā kararehe, kāri i kitea i te moana nui ākiua.
Ko te kimi kupu, ko te whakarite kōrero, ko te whakarite tikanga, ka hanga ka tōki te taiao o te waia rātou i tai tuatahi mai ai.
Nō reira i te tainga mai o tātou tīpuna, nā rātou tonu i hanga te reo tuatahi o tēnei whenua.
Ko te reo Māori tētahi reo i tipu ake i roto i tēnei. I meki i take mai i tēnei whenua. Kāre he wāhi tuatu i tēnei e whakaari nei te pūtake mai o te reo Māori ana koinei ko Aotearoa nei.
E meana ngā maunga, e meana ngā moana o tēnei whenua ko te reo Māori tōna reo.
Ngā reire ka noho kuira te reo mātāmua o tēnei whenua.
Nō reira meheme pirangi ana te tangata kia noho ki tēnei whenua, kia whanaunga atu ki ngā tangata e noho i konei, ka re tu atu ho te kōrero i te reo i a rātou.
I te wai tai mai ar te Pākehā ki konei, i ruma kina rātou ki roto i te ao Māori.
Ki te kore mohi i te kōrero Māori, ka re tai rata ngā Māori te pachipachi te hoko i a rātou taonga, aha nuai ho, ki te moe anō ki i a rātou. Nā reira, ai, e ai ki te kōrero he nui tonu rātou i kōrero Māori e rāwa. Engari, nā te kimi oranga tērā, e hari te mei aroha nui ki te ao Māori a rānei.
E te wā ka tai ki wainga i tērā rautau a rā o te tekau mā waru. Kua huri te tai i roto i tēnei whenua, ko te tino huringa o te tai, ko te ekenga mai o te tini o ngai Pākehā nei, kia nui atu a ngai Pākehā ki tēnei whenua, ka iti iho te iwi Māori.
Displacement from whenua, displacement from your ukaipo, displacement from the very essence of who you are as a people, which meant that things like te reo and our tikanga were the huge sacrifice.
Ka hua mai te kāwanatanga Pākehā i konei, ka tipu mai i reira te tai hiehia kia mate te tangata e kia nei he Māori.
They are determined to fight, and we must treat them as a species of savage beasts, which must be exterminated to render the colonization of New Zealand possible.
And that comes with all the other things, the diseases and language shift, culture shift, resource challenges, and ultimately some fighting. All of that just culminated in one really toxic kind of mess,
Pākehā society starts to purport and present Māori as being lesser than, and having that kind of portrayal around the savage, around the Neolithic culture, around, living in the mud hut, starts to emerge as a power play that starts to render not only the people but their language as also being inferior.
We were taught that everything we were doing was bad and everything they were doing was good, that white was right. I'm just going to be frank. This is not a racist talk. This is just what it is. It's just the reality. This is reality. This is what our people have faced.
I reira mutu ai te tahuri te Pākehā ki te ako I te reo Māori kia noho ko te reo Pākehā anake tō rātou reo.
I tērā wā, ko te nuinga o ngā Māori e noho ki tua whenua, e noho ana ki ngā papa kāinga, ki ngā marae. Ka noho tonu ko te reo Māori ki o rātou kāinga. Ka mōhio tonu te Māori, mea pirangi ana kia mahi Pākehī, ka tere ki te atu me ako te reo Pākehā.
I ki te rātou I whakatairanga ake te haupori Pākehā I tō te Māori. Nō reira I tere tahuri ki te reo Pākehā kia kimi oranga mo te reanga ka whai ake I muri iho.
Ko tō rātou wawata nui nei kia mau ngā tikanga, kia mau tō rātou mana whakahaere, kia mau te rangatiratanga, koera te take I uru ki roto I ngā mahi Pākehī, I uru ki te kāwanatanga, kia mau tonu te rangatiratanga. Kāore o tātou tupuna I whakaaro ka ngaro te reo Māori.
I don't think anybody truly could have foreseen what was going to happen up until we had Pākehā politicians who were really individually keen on killing the language. Around that time, Britain was getting really good at assimilating, and it had learnt to do a lot by stealth. It had figured out that if the government as a machine sets down, a little tidbit of attitude here and there, that citizens would probably do the rest. And they did.
And so that desire to push institutions like churches, like schools, to start increasing the amount of English leads to educational policies like the Education Ordinance in 1847, which starts to assimilate Māori into Pākehā society.
They live in wild and uncivilized anarchy. We will not, therefore, be doing anything wrong in subjecting them to our wishes.
And so the ordinance itself is just a first survey that was sort of done under the guise of, we just want to know what our new settler children are being taught, and we want to make sure that it has all the nice things that our children are learning over in England, and it was sort of couched along that kind of way. It wasn't necessarily couched as a, we are going to assume control of every little detail. And then a bit later on, the Native Skills Act, 1867, it was that time where things were starting to become more of a takeover.
English is the bread and butter language, and if you want to earn your bread and butter, you must speak English.
The Native Schools Act helps to corral Māori into particular spaces. It's a form of control. It's also a form of making sure that the mission that they were undertaking could be achieved, because it was a type of conversion. converting Māori from being who they are in Aotearoa into becoming citizens of New Zealand.
Ka mōhio tonu te kāwanatanga, me mea ka noho reo Māori tonu te iwi Māori, he ua te whakatutuki a rātou rautaki mō tēnei whenua.
And so it wasn't worth working on ngā paki, ko tō te rā ki a rātou. And you know that natural progression of life is that when they pass, this is going to be the new generation. So you hammer this generation, the tamariki.
A big part of that is to get them to only speak English.
Engari, ahakoa Kāori whakaitia te reo Māori i ngā kura, e hari te mea nā te kāwanatanga tērā whakahau. Nā ētahi tāngata mutunga mai o te kaikiri tērā whakahau. He māmā noiho ki te Pākehā tērā karo. He māmā noiho tā rātou ki atu, nā te kāwanatanga o te wā tērā whakaro. Kāori i ahau, kāori i tōku whānau, he kōrero noiho i puta i tērā wā ana kua rereke i nai nei. Kau, he tangata. Mena he tāngata i taua wā, he tāngata i konei, i tēnei whenua, e ora tonu ana i tēnei whenua, e mahi ana i ngā mahi engari he kaikiri.
Ngāi Tahu's language loss happened, I guess, before others. I tere huri ki te reo Pākehā. I think about 7 generations ago, my tupuna signed Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and I listened to the names that come after that, and very quickly they turn from Iwiko, Puwai, to George, to Tom, to Monty, to James, to Stacey. But it's a sign that that's what was valued.
I think one of the things that when we reflect and we critically analyse some of the actions of the past, there are many instances where our people exert their own mana over their situation. Our people actually made decisions with the true belief that they were making decisions for the betterment of their iwi.
O tātou tīpuna, ara te mōhio, he pēnei ke te mahi a te atau iwi tērā time.
Depending on the hapori, Māori leaders were keen on native schools, partly because they also gave land to build schools.
Me wā rātou whakaro, mō wā rātou tamariki, tuku atu ki te kura, ke mōhio rā tui o rātou ingo, ke mōhio rā te mahi whika.
They wanted their children to be educated. They wanted them to have access to opportunities that they could see building up around them.
I tērā wahu i te kaha te reo, kura nake te reo e korero te ana i te iwi. Nei rā kua pēhea mai te kura, hoki mai puta ana i te kura ko te reo Māori e rere ana. Kāre he mataku i tērā wā ka ngaro.
So I don't think all of the expectations were fulfilled, because as we know, a lot of the land that was where those schools were built came under the government, so it became a subversive way of being able to claim more Māori land without making any considerations for resourcing those schools. So they become second-class approach to education.
A refined education would be inappropriate for Māori because they are better calculated by nature to get their living by manual labour.
The curriculum seemed to be preparing Māori children for the kind of labour that I don't think would be well respected by settlers. So we're talking like looking after households and looking after stables, being farm hands. I think that's when we had a group of people who really didn't think that Māori were capable of being educated. Obviously, we know that's not true. We had our houses of learning, we had our tohunga.
Abandonment of the native tongue inflicts no loss on the Māori. Education should lead them to be a good farmer and a good farmer's wife.
And so that ideological impact on communities starts to erode the very essence of who they are as people.
At Aotearoa is the Manutahi Native District High School with a roll of 300 pupils. They come from the busy township and the farms of the district, some by school bus and many on horses.
The native schools are straight out of the colonial playbook. It's quite clear in terms of legislation that it was an active removal of Te Reo Māori in schools and that it was enacted in physically violent ways.
It was an active campaign against us, and it was state-sponsored terrorism.
The Manutahi School is administered by the Native Schools branch of the Education Department.
Native school. The name of the school itself gave you some clear indication of the status that was put on those learning institutions.
The morning classes begin, and for the infants, learning to read is the beginning of knowledge.
Will you find first? See if you can find it there.
And that terminology was used right throughout the Māori schools in New Zealand. Now, how many children would have gone through there at that time? Thousands, thousands. That was a whole generation. They suffered corporal punishment because they spoke their own language.
Every whānau probably does have that story. It might have been their grandparents or their great-grandparents or their great-great-grandparents.
I roto i a mata o Taranaki, I reira no ngā kui e kōrero ana mō o rātou mātua I mauherengia I te kore whakai ki te tuku I a rātou tamariki ki te kura. Nā te mea kāre rātou ngā mātua I hiahia kia kite I a rātou tamariki e patua ana mō te rā reo I a rātou.
Good boy, Bill.
Children learn by doing, by expressing themselves, translating impressions into pictures and pictures into words. The teacher is a guide, and the children gradually acquire the basic skills.
We quite often talk about the government banning te reo in schools. But if we look a bit deeper, particularly with respect to people who've looked at our ledgers of corporal punishment from the time and seen all these names and punishments, but not seen any log of a punishment for a child speaking Māori. It wasn't the machine of government. There were people within government like T.B. Strong and all those people. Actually, those were just really horrible people. And they wrote probably unsanctioned things to schools that was picked up by equally horrible people. And they therefore exerted force, pressure, violence on our kids that didn't get logged. If it was a totally sanctioned thing by government and it was on the list of things you were allowed to smack a kid for at school, why you wouldn't be free about recording it. Having said that, the government is the body of imperialism and colonialism that brought those people here.
I tipu mai ahau I roto o rua pāhuna. Tino hia hia ahau ki te haere ki te kura. Nō reira, ka 5 oku tau. Ka haere au ki te kura. Ka tae ki te kēti. Ka ki mai taku tunane. Ka kuhu koe I tēnei kēti. Kaua koe e kōrero Māori. Tino mataku mātau I taua wā, nā te tino hāmene pea I runga I a mātau. He rōpū I reira, te mahi a taua rōpū e hari kōrero pēnei, kai te kōrero Māori a mea mā. Nō reira, ka kuhu mai ana mātau ki roto I te runga, ka ki mai te kai whakaako. E koe, e tu, ka patua o mātau ringa mā te rākau. Kore ana tōku whaia e patu I a mātau. Kore. Nō reira he mea hau katoa e nei kia hau I te kura. He aha te otinga, kua kore kōrero, kua kore he whakaaro.
Te wā iau, haere ki te kura, haere ki te ngahere, ki te tiki, kareo, te Pākehā, Super Jack, e ono ngā waputanga, rere ana te toto. Rere ana te toto. And when you are caned and whipped for speaking Māori, it's virtually impossible to really share the feelings that you get 50, 60 years later.
So when you beat a child, we understand more about what that does now. When you train people and you give them this association of physical pain with speaking a language, that resides as a trauma in them.
That psychological punishment to eradicate something that's integral to your identity has a profound effect on the way tamariki Māori view themselves, their place in the world. It also has a profound effect on how you approach te reo Māori yourself. For many, it was just a total abandonment of their identity and culture.
Many Maoris around here, very few of them can speak the Maori language.
They can understand it, but most can't speak it.
We do get to a point in the 60s where grandparents to their kids and their grandchildren, they're speaking English. And that's like the red flag.
The disempowerment of the language, that is the beginning of the disempowerment of a generation of a people.
Often, Maoris who've been brought up in town have lost their sense of identity, of where they're from and what tribe they're from.
By the time we get to the 1970s, we have a generation of Māori who are largely not speakers of Te Reo Māori, moving into universities, being conscientised around political theory. They're annoyed. They're annoyed at what has happened generations beforehand to eliminate them as people.
The 1970s was really a time of challenging authorities for us as young Māori, because we could see what was happening. It was very obvious that our language was in distress.
And so Ngā Tamatoa at Auckland University and Te Reo Māori Society at Victoria University, you start to see them taking a stand on reclaiming Te Reo Māori.
As a youngster, Māori wasn't spoken in our home. English was my language. So when I went to university in 1969, met a whole lot of other Māori language students, and we became the activists that became Te Reo Māori Society.
Good morning, Mrs. Jackson.
My involvement was with Ngā Tamatoa in Wellington.
We were all bright and we were astute politically. Oh, yes.
The thing was, our parents' generation were, they used the conservative methods of protest. They were very polite.
It is high time civilized multicultural attitudes took over from the ignorance born of white racism.
And we got to the point where, no more politeness. We just need to, shove it in their faces and let them know that we're not happy with the way in which they treat us.
The facts are clear. Māoris are not succeeding in the Pākehā world.
I like to think about the petition as being a partnership between Ngā Tamatoa and Te Reo Māori Society.
I don't recall what year it was, whether it was 1970 or perhaps early 1971. Hana Te Hemara came to our home and requested help from my dad for her Ngā Tamatoa petition. Dad put it to us as to whether or not we were willing to support the petition, and we just loved the idea. Once she had us on board, we were there, totally, 100%.
My sister Kathy was the one who said, well, kia whai mana te kōrero. We need some signatures. Technically speaking, of course, the lawyers and law students in the group told her the fact that we had a petition was technically sufficient, but she didn't accept that, so we couldn't. So there's no doubt in my mind, my memories are very clear on this, that the drive came from women in our group. Basically, they had the final say, I suppose.
So I was the controller. I had to be the cool, calm Lieutenant General, holding the fort. I had determined who would go down what street and, how many houses they had to cover.
My role and what I did was in collecting signatures. It was one of those situations of putting yourself out there, being aware that you could possibly be abused or attacked, but taking the stance that this was a necessary thing to do. So you had to get in there and you had to get some signatures. It was scary.
So on the day, on September the 14th, 1972, ka pā mai te marangai ki Tūpoko Dika.
We came together at Ngāti Pōneke Hall prior to moving across to Parliament grounds. I had a 6-week-old baby at the time, and I didn't want to take him out into the cold. So he and I and my 10-year-old brother Campbell stayed behind at Ngāti Pōneke Hall to prepare lunch for the people who were taking the petition to Parliament.
So we were all set to coalesce at Parliament at I think, I can't remember the time, 10 o'clock. And then as we're organised, there was a karanga, and then we went to the steps of Parliament. Te onaku rene, ko ia te kaumātua, te koroua, I aki I awhi mai I a mātou. And te onaku went up to one of the mezzanine type levels on the steps so that he wasn't looking too far up. We had talked about that. Kia kore tō tātou koroua e tūpau. There was the speeches that were made.
We will regain Māori and Pākehā alike a greater sense of respect for each other, a greater feeling that we are something.
Hana gave the petition, and then we adjourned to Ngāti Pōneke for a cup of tea. I won't say it was anticlimax, because it was a big day, but there was a huge sense of relief that we'd done it, and it was a sense of achievement, really.
Part of that is because we stood up. I'm really proud of that. Yep.
Ko te petihana reo Māori te timatanga o tētahi rautaki pakari pakeke nei. Te haringātu ki te whatitoka o te pāremata, te whare miere, he wero tērā ki te kāwanatanga, he wero ki ngai Māori, ko tai ki te wā me tū moto tātou reo Māori.
Kohanga reo kura kaupapa in the 80s, whare wānanga, irirangi Māori, Māori TV. Hei pukatoa mai, ko ngā kaupapa Māori.
All of these movements that are very much institutions of Māori society, they were whānau focused. They looked at all the parts of the whānau, the different generations of the whānau, as a way to not only focus on te reo Māori, but actually lift our people up, to be proud to be Māori, to value ourselves, to value who we are as a people. So the things that Ngā Tamatoa and the Te Reo Māori Society were fighting for, these were starting to become reality.
For the last 2 months, they've helped launch a new language program instigated by the Department of Māori Affairs called Te Kohanga Reo.
What that showed us is that we all have a part to play, and the way we play it may be different, but everybody can and should engage. Te oranga o te reo Māori te take.
Konnichiwa mahi. Konnichiwa mahi. Oerika. I tino Māori taku ao, I taku ohinga. ko aku mātua e kia he radical I awawara. Ai tukuna mātau ko kutunga ane ki te kohanga reo. Nā wai ki te kura kaupapa Māori, ki te whare kura. E rare hoki mā kora tatarei. Ai. Hana ki te noho? Ka whakarite a kora kai. No reira ko te reo, I kōrerotia e awau o tira e mātau ko tōku whānau, ko te reo Māori. He āhua pōturi ake taku whakawhiti o ku whakaaro ki te reo Pākehā I te mea ko o ku whakaaro katoa kei te reo Māori. Tūturu whakamaua kia tina, tina, hui e kai ki e kai. No reira ka whānau mai aku tamariki, koi ana ke tāku mōhio ai, ko te kōrero Māori atu ki ngā tamariki, I runga I te mōhio ki te whakawhenua I te reo Māori ki roto ki ngā kāinga, mā reira e ora I te reo. Kainga mai kia kutahi tananga. Katai ka tākaro ke mūtata, ne?
Te reo is revitalised. Te reo's safe. It's not going anywhere. It's not going to die tomorrow.
Ko tā tātou ke he whakahau, he ki atu anei, ngā ara ka tai e koe te whai. Ki te kore koe piringa, kei te pai, engari kauhara mai ki au tangi weto ai, ka reo te mārama ki ngā kōrero, te aha.
Ko tētahi o ngā wero I nāia nei, ko te horapatanga o te reo.
There's still a lot of work to do so that all Māori have access to their heritage.
But there's a whole lot of trauma and a whole lot of healing we need to do.
I've just seen so many stories that's not about the history, it's about the experience of whānau. Ka puritia, te reo, ki tēnei takiwa o te korokoro. It's like it's sitting like this knot right here. And they can almost hear it and they can almost speak it, but it's been taken away. And it's wrapped in so much sadness and regret and belief in our inferiority that you can't unpack that quickly, particularly not at a night class.
All of those things, I think, are what we call language trauma. I don't think that they are the same as language anxiety in general. And I think that you can have all of that going on plus language anxiety, all in the one. But there is an end point to that. And I think we should all know that.
No, I haven't learned today. So, growing up from the beginning, went to Kindi and then straight through Kura Pākehā all the way through. Even though we didn't have the reo, my mum still made sure we knew our tikanga. So we're always down the marae, always at the urupā, always helping out. But I've always known since a young boy that I didn't have the reo and that I needed it.
Aotearoa tito te mihi.
Oh yes, he mama te rā rewe. There's been many a times I've been sort of asked to stand up and do a whai kōrero, and you've never done it in your life. You wouldn't know where to start. You look like you've got something, but you've got nothing. Yeah, times like that is the hardest.
Pehea tō taki waitara.
Taki waitara, Aotearoa? Oh, that says a lot, but I haven't started.
Oh, nee.
For my wife and I, we sort of found our love and our want for te ao Māori, te reo Māori, before we had our son. So we both agreed and we promised each other that we'd bring him up through te ao Māori no matter what that took. And, you know, when he started kohanga, he would come home, start teaching us things, and we'd learn with him. But I just felt like I needed to go leave everything else behind and just go and learn the reo. So, yeah, took a year off for mahi and signed up to Takiura. Week 2 into Takiura, I was already able to go home and I was already able to go home and have proper conversations with my boy. It's definitely been life-changing. I regret that it's taken me this long to do something about it, but I'm glad I can give that to my son. Yeah.
Friday.
So everyone who's engaged in their own way and found their way for championing Te Reo Māori are all an important part of the revival, survival and revitalisation of Te Reo Māori.
You know, the struggles of our Pākeke to bring us to where we are today, there are a number of hapori who have recreated Generation 1 from nothing. But it's a significant step in the right direction.
Ko rātau I mōhio a kune, ka kitea ngā hua o te reo Māori, o ngā tikanga Māori, o te ahurea Māori, ko tā tātou he titiro ki te ahunga whakamua.
He nui aku tūmana ko moto tātou reo Māori. Tuatahi me tangata whenua anō te reo Māori I tēnei whenua. Ka rongo tātou katoa I tōna reka.
Ko ngā tamariki kei runga I te pōro whawhi.
Nō reira ko te haipapa ki a tātou, te hunga mātau ki te kōrero Māori, te hunga I kōrero Māori ana, ko te tōtō mai ngā whānau, kia au kaipō anō te reo ki roto ki a rātau, kia au kaipō anō te reo ki roto ki o rātau kāinga.
Ko wai kei runga I te tarere.
Ka tō ngā tangata ki ana he Māori rātou me kōrero Māori. O karu poti mai koe, kākāriki mai ki rane o karu ohara ne. Mena ke te ki koe he toto Māori o, e whaka Māori ana koe I a koe ke te ki koe he Māori koe akasi tēnā, tauri mai ki te reo nei. Ko te ao Māori tēnei te haere nei.